Welcome to the Elite Level Podcast, episode 2 now. My name's Alex Elaine, and this is the podcast where we feature special guests to walk you through how elite level performers think, act, and operate. And today, we've got a very, very special guest, someone who's very close to me and special to me, Alanzo. Thanks a million for being on.
Alex, really great to be here with you. How you doing?
I am doing fantastic. How about yourself?
I'm doing well.
Brilliant. Well, look, you've got an amazing story, and obviously I know you a lot more intimately than the guests here. So just to kind of kick off, give us 2 minutes on who you are, what you do, and maybe some of your career highlights as well.
That's fine. So my name is Alanzo Blackstock. I've been working in the IT industry for over 30 years now, which is, when I say that out loud, it feels kind of like strange. And so I started kind of like from school, went into the industry as a repair engineer, repairing modems, repairing computers, then went in as a project engineer, project manager. And I think about 2006, I decided to actually go into sales when I was working at Cisco. So I joined Cisco. I was at Cisco for 12 years, and that was my first foray into this in a sales role. A sales manager took a chance on me, and I haven't looked back. And so I've been doing sales and then sales management. Recently went into the role of like partner sales management, which is a kind of like a different take on sales, moved into different organizations, and now I find myself at an organization where I lead the partner sales organization for the UK and Ireland. So that's me from a professional point of view. I'm a father. I'm a son. I'm a husband. I've got 2 kids that keep me awake at night, every night.
That's a great intro, Alanzo. Appreciate that. And really, let's just start to maybe peel back some of the layers there, really going back to actually your project management days, which I think is pretty fascinating because we don't often hear about people that have maybe had that background and then transitioned in. So just help us understand a bit more about what you did within that role and actually that moment that you said, sales is actually the direction I want to take.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I've always been. We're always in sales, right? So I've always been like customer facing in terms of everything that I've done. Certainly since I'm going to have to wipe my brow. Sorry.
Sure.
Certainly since I sorry. Bit hot. So I've always been in sales. I've always felt myself being very much customer focused. So my journey as a project engineer, project support person, then a project engineer, always was trying to please customers. So that's always what I've done. And the natural progression to project management was due to the fact that my organization at the time wanted someone to really wrap their whole arms around the customer from end to end. So they saw me as a good guy, as a project engineer, giving the customer what he needed. And they wanted me to do it from an end-to-end perspective. The first big project that I did was for a bank, ABN AMRO. I actually passed the bank at Bishopsgate today, nice. 250 Bishopsgate. And it was a major project that was a Cisco project. And that got me really, really close as a project manager to the project team at ABN AMRO. And this was almost before we actually sold the technology. So we did a lot of the project management and the services before the technology was sold. And as a result, I was interacting with a lot of salespeople that were wanting to make sure that the technology followed through.
Right.
And it transpired that they saw that the route to selling the technology was through me. Because of my relationship with the customer.
Sure.
And that was really my first entry into sales, where I realized that there was a value in terms of what I was doing and the trust that I had and the relationship that I built with the customer and how that could be used to sell technology, to actually really kind of like continue the journey with that customer. So that's really how I got into sales. But I think we're always in sales, right? Selling is about offering something of value, right? And so we're always in sales and doing something in sales.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and it kind of takes me back as well to my own early days starting out in law, right, and then making that transition. But one of the things that's really interesting in what you said is just that point on building relationships, right, being able to wrap your arms around the customer and doing that from different lenses. And I know that was something that I could definitely relate to. So. Yeah. If we fast forward a little bit now, so you've taken on your first role, you've come from a project management background. What was it actually like stepping into those sales shoes, so to speak? What surprised you, what excited you, and what intimidated you at that point?
I think the one thing that I was really nervous about was the goal. was being given a goal and that was your measure of performance for the quarter, for the year, and that made me really anxious in terms of, now I'm in the seat. People have seen something in me and my relationship with customer, and I have to leverage that thing that they've seen to actually achieve something, a goal, and that's how I'm going to be ultimately measured. And that was kind of scary at the time. I remember my first couple of years, and my sales manager at the time was also my mentor, so he knew I was kind of like developing into this role, and he was really challenging around that in terms of making sure you're doing things that specifically achieve the goal of achieving the quota, the number, on a quarterly basis, on a yearly basis. And at Cisco, where I was at the time, we looked at our numbers every week. Right, so we had a weekly forecast, and they expected to have change every week in your forecast, whether it's pipeline or bookings or whatever. So that was the thing that really made me nervous. I think the thing that surprised me the most was how I was able to really continue the relationship that I had with customers. I felt that my trust and the relationship I built was based on the credibility of delivering something in that project management, project engineering world. You're delivering something of value. And I felt as soon as I went over to what we called at the time the dark side, that would erode. I felt that may kind of like, I may lose that, but actually that didn't happen. So that was really good for me in terms of building my confidence that I could still continue with the assets and the capabilities I had that were relevant in this part of the new world for me, right? So that was good. So but I think it was the number, and having to kind of like obsess around the number was the hard thing for me.
Got it. And it's interesting when you say the dark side, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a semi-pivot here, right? But that is something that I think has kind of tainted the sales industry, especially for us maybe being in tech and software for quite a while. It's that perception of what sales is and what goes into it as a profession.
Yeah.
So as you kind of were making that transition and you knew that there was that thought process of it being the dark side, what did that kind of mean to you, right? Did you feel like going into it that, this is actually something that constitutes that title, or did your perception start to change as you actually got into it yourself and got to understand a little bit more about what's entailed?
Well, I mean, selling's a salesman there's always been a salesperson. There's always been a dark side. There's always been that dark side. So there's always been connotations around, secondhand car salesmen, estate agents, watch sales. There's always been a connotation that selling and a salesperson is somehow deceitful, or selling you something that's not quite of value. There's the exchange of value isn't quite as equitable, right? I don't know if you've watched the Wolf of Wall Street, right? That didn't help the sales community,
yes.
Right? In terms of, it's someone that's got kind of like who can articulate himself well enough, articulate his deceit well enough to get a deal, right? So I think that's always been in the purview of what people perceive around salespeople, and it's an unfortunate thing, but it's real. And I think when you come into sales, I think you come in with that perspective that actually I need to have some of these things. I need to be quick tongued. I need to be, I need to be quick on my feet. I need to be kind of like, in order to be able to be successful. And so that's always been a challenge for me in terms of how you do that, because I'm conscious that I didn't come from that place, and also from the way that I was brought up, and the way that I was reared as in my family. Those weren't the natural skills. I wasn't. I'm an introvert by nature, so I'm not an extrovert. And people perceive salespeople to be extroverts, right? So I didn't naturally fall into that typical sales thing that you see on the Wolf of Wall Street. But what I quickly realized over maybe a couple of years is nothing about that. There's a lot of esteem and value to giving people what they need. For the right value. And I started my journey in sales selling services, helping people, and because I came from a services background, so it's helping people have the right services and people that they need to deliver on the project that they needed to be successful. So that really helped to realize that it's not about trying to sell someone something that they don't need or is overpriced, but it's actually giving people the value that they need to be successful in whatever that is. So I quickly learned that over that, my first couple of years, for sure.
I think what I love about what you said in all of that, Alanzo, is it's almost that bringing your whole self to your role, right? I think, as you say, a lot of times people are thinking about what adjustments they have to make to who they are inherently. Do they need to play a role to be able to fit in? But really the essence of what you're saying is that you can bring that same integrity that maybe was a part of your upbringing and ultimately your whole self to your role, and then find a way to learn the systems and the processes and the blueprint that's going to help you drive success in your role. Would you say that's kind of a fair...
I mean, I think that's absolutely right. I think I'd go a bit further than to say that you have to bring your whole self. I think there isn't a typical, in my view, there isn't a typical character that makes a good salesperson. I don't believe that there is a typical character that makes a good salesperson. In that regard, I think anybody can be a good salesperson. So you don't have to be an extrovert, as I said before, to be a good salesperson. You don't have to be a great presenter to be a good salesperson, right? I think what you need to do is to actually understand the skill of selling. There is a skill of selling. There is a methodology, there's processes, there's strategies, there's tools. So you need to invest in that, just like you would invest in, if you want to be a doctor or a nurse, you'd have to invest in learning, right? So as long as you understand you do the work to learn and to understand the trade, then it's about applying your capabilities and your strengths to that particular role. So if you're an introvert, there's a lot of strengths that you can leverage as an introvert into a sales role. Whereas if you're an extrovert, then it's something different. If you are a big thinker, where you think in kind of like blue sky terms, then there's value in terms of how you apply that in a sales role. Versus if you are a detail person, that you need everything to be, I'm a bit of a detail person, where you need everything to be in line and configured and controlled, then how you apply that in a sales context is also important. So you bring your whole self to the role, and you actually leverage the capabilities that you have rather than trying to be what you think a salesperson should be. I think that's probably the worst scenario, right? It's actually learn your trade and then think about what your skills, what your strengths are, who are you, what makes you motivated, and then apply them in the right way in your role as a salesperson. It's
great insights, Alanzo. I often say you can't teach natural talent as well, right? So when you talk about bringing yourself, adopting those systems and those tools and those processes, it's a great formula to drive early success. And on that, I just wanted to pick up on one other thing about those earlier days for you. You spoke about being nervous, right? There being some challenging times, things to navigate. Was there a moment where you questioned if you'd done the right thing? I almost want to live in that time where, you're saying that the pressure's on with the numbers, it's been a big adjustment. Were there times where you thought, is this actually for me? And if so, how did you navigate that conversation in your own mind?
Yeah, there were several occasions where I felt, what the hell am I doing? I remember my first year, maybe my second year in sales, my first couple of years, I had, it was getting towards the end of the year. I was 30-40% of my goal for the year. but I had one deal that would get me to like 200. And my manager at the time said, just focus, concentrate on this deal. Just make sure that you do everything you can to actually get this deal across the line. And that was, I questioned everything. there was a I don't know, 6 or 7 week period. I questioned everything in terms of, I felt that I was doing as much as I can. I felt the pressure of the year, of the end of the year. I felt the pressure of my boss. I felt like the customer didn't quite get everything that they needed. There's a real thing in selling, particularly selling services. Is in selling services, you're kind of like selling the invisible. You're selling a promise. You're selling a promise that these skills will be the right skills that you need for a project that you need to be successful for your outcomes. So it's not like the product. You're not selling, there's not this tangible thing or a product, whether it's hardware or software, it's services. So it makes it's a bit more pressure in terms of selling something that's not quite tangible. And I just felt that I'd done as much as I can, but the customer wasn't quite convinced. And I questioned everything. I questioned whether I was the right person in the right place to do something in my first couple of years that was so big and that was so critical for my services organization, services sales organization at the time. Yeah, I questioned that. Yeah.
A lot of what I'm picking up from you, and I guess I'm partly pulling what I know from you personally, but also just what this conversation today, is that you're very self-aware. You're able to look inwardly, look at yourself, and then start to make adjustments that can help take you forward. So this podcast is all about how people can go from good or great or average towards elite. Is that self-awareness been a big ingredient in the success that you've had in your own career, helping you get towards much more of an elite kind of status where you are now?
I mean, I think, yes. I think you have to be self-aware. You have to... self-awareness is about understanding what your strengths and weaknesses are. That's one thing. But that self-awareness is also about understanding that in the context of, your relationships, in the context of, relationships, whether they're with customers, whether they're internal, whether they're with partners, etc. So in understanding, what you can add and what you need to be added to in order to help with customers with different relationships, right? Mm-hmm. So self-awareness for me is absolutely critical. So I am always internalizing, sometimes too much, I think, but I'm always internalizing things in terms of the situation. I think sometimes, as I said, sometimes too much in the context that you realize at some stage that it's not all about you. Mm. And I think the other thing that's really made a real difference to me is actually the lessons and the things that have resonated with me along the way. So at that time when I was having that challenge with this big deal that did eventually come in, one of the things that someone said to me, it was the head of sales for Cisco in EMEA at the time. He said to me, the thing that you have to remember, Alanzo, is that as big a pressure that you're feeling on this deal, which is important to the organization, the thing that you need to remember is that that there's an abundance of opportunities like this. This isn't the only one that will come your way. There's an abundance. There is a lot of opportunities based on the technology that we do, based on the world that we live in. There's lots of other opportunities if this one isn't successful. You're not living in a world of scarcity. You're not living in a world where there's only one part of the pie that is available to you. So yes, get this deal in, but just remember that your whole world doesn't rest on this. And that really, for me, was critical, because it stopped me from doing two things. It stopped me from putting too much pressure on myself that this was the be all and end all of everything, first of all. So it gave me some perspective around my role in terms of being successful with this particular opportunity. The second thing that it did, it made me realize that actually this isn't necessarily about competition per se. Sales isn't necessarily about competition per se. abundance, there is plenty of pies. There's plenty of opportunities for everyone. We're not short. We're not scarce of opportunities, particularly in technology in our environment. So it's not about trying to beat someone at it or beat someone to it or take a bigger share of the pie. It's really about, realizing that there are other ways and there are other opportunities that are going to come your way because there's so much there. That for me was, along with the introspection, but really the perspective in terms of reminding yourself where you are in that moment was really, really critical for me. And I've taken that along all of my journey since. Actually, you don't think that you're in a, this pressurized environment that you think you're in isn't probably as pressurized as it actually is. Take yourself away, recognize that the world is full of good stuff, and then focus on, okay, what do I need to do for this one with a different perspective? That was really helpful for me.
I felt like I was reliving that moment with you a little bit there. It really landed, and it's taken me back a little bit. I'm actually reading quite a lot of books at the moment on stoicism. I don't know if you've heard of that as a theme. And in the book I'm just started reading, it was explaining why Stoics existed in the first place. And a big part of it is because they say in school, you're taught maths and academia and all of these things, but you're not really taught how to live, so to speak, and how to operate. And so the reason this takes me towards what you're saying is a big part of that way of living is thinking about getting control over your mind, right? Building emotional resiliency and putting things into perspective. And that example you just gave, what it put in my mind was that a situation is what it is, but how you respond to it, how you interpret it in your own mind, that's really a choice and a decision. I think your leader there really helped put that situation into perspective for you so that you could then take that and go forward. So
absolutely, that's exactly what he did.
Thanks for sharing that. I want to fast forward a little bit to your Cisco days, because you mentioned that a little bit now. And before kind of unpacking some of what went into that, the thing I'm really fascinated about is you said it was 12 years, right? That you spent
12
there.
years, yeah.
Now, in this era we're in, of which I'm also a big part of, not as many people, you don't see it as often that people have runs that long. And you did it in a very large corporate, right? Not necessarily a super young, small, hyper-growth startup. So put me into Alanzo's mind at that time. Why did you make that decision and why did you stay so long?
Why did I make that decision for 12 years?
To join that business at that time?
Yeah.
And then why did you stay for as long as you did?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in this industry, particularly so Cisco's internet working. Cisco built the internet as they told us at the time, right? So and I'd been in that industry for a long time. So actually, in some respects, I was always going to end up at Cisco. So Cisco was at that time for me the organization that everybody aspired to. It was kind of like what Microsoft used to be, or what IBM used to be, or what HP used to be. It was there. If you're in that PC industry, if you're in that software industry, everybody aspired to be there, and everybody in the network industry aspired to be in Cisco. And I'd worked in and around Cisco partners, Cisco technologies for a long time. So this was like, I needed to get into Cisco. This was like, at the time for me, it was like I'd arrived when I got to Cisco, right? So I was always going to end up there. And actually, I was fortunate enough. It was some of the relationships that I built in the past that got me into Cisco. In terms of the time there, I didn't join Cisco with the intention of being there for 12 years, for sure. That didn't happen. There wasn't whilst I know it was my destination, my final destination, I didn't have a sense that I was going to be there. I didn't know how long I was going to be there. And actually, when you look at my career in Cisco, my time in Cisco anyway, I probably had about four really distinct jobs, different jobs in there. So each one of those was a few years, right? So it didn't feel like I was there for 12 years, if I'm honest, because I was doing different things, different significant things in the organization. But I think I see where you're going with this, right? Because my my father worked in the job that he had. He was there for 25 years. There's people that have been in similar roles, particularly large corporates, for like 10, 12, 15 years. And I think today, there's more of a sense that, 3 or 4 years, okay, it's time. It's time to move on, right? Which is I think is a function of the times that we're in, the changes of the society, the different expectations that people have. I think the whole loyalty thing to organizations and people's perspective of loyalty to organizations has changed over time. That have caused that as well, right? Which is a good thing, I think.
Yeah. Well, have yours changed, right? Because you've seen multiple eras in essence. You talk about Cisco in essence in incepting the internet in a way, right? And so you've been able to observe that type of growth journey, but now you're also seeing this new rage of hypergrowth in San Francisco and UK born hypergrowth businesses, right? And so what is your perspective based on what you know now, if you were talking to, that same Alanzo back then, but today?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been fortunate in as much as this goes back to what we were saying about abundance. I was saying about abundance, right? This is just the continuation of the abundance of our industry. And I think that was a sense that's the sense that I had then, and that was a revelation that I had then. And I think that is continuing to play out and continues to play out today. The relevance of technology in terms of how it can change businesses, how it can change consumer behavior, how it can change many things, right? There's a whole opportunity around, the climate change and what technology can do. Automation is still, in its infancy, right? So that abundance is still really, really relevant today. So I'm not sure I would tell myself anything different. I don't think there's too much different today. I think the speed and the pace may have changed slightly. I think the one thing that I probably would focus on is making sure that the value that I got was equitable. I think when I look at my father, I'm not sure that he got an equitable exchange of value between his organization and him as an employee. And I think that's what I would probably focus on more. Know your worth and get your worth.
Yes.
Right? I think that would probably be what I'd focus on more. But certainly from an opportunity perspective, I would continue to be in this industry, and I continue to be in sales for sure.
I love the know your worth and get your worth. And again, I think something that kind of feeds off the back of that is being in organizations and environments that one, stretch you, but that two, develop you, right? It sounds like your journey, you were able to continue to rise through the ranks, challenge yourself in different roles, different locations. That in itself, I think, needs to be a fundamental part of anyone's role. It's probably less about, do you do 10 years at a single business or do 2 years at 5 different companies, but are you in an environment where you're learning, you're growing, you're developing, you're earning, and you're actually able to achieve your own version of success? I think that's probably at the core of that.
Yeah.
So something that I want to expand on with you, Alanzo, is you mentioned being in the partner, kind of the partner side of sales for the mass majority of your career. So help us understand how that came about. Was that by design, or did that kind of find its way onto your own lap?
That came through relationships. So I had the great thing into when you're developing your career, and I think particularly in sales, one of the key things that help with success is how you build and maintain relationships, because they become critical for you right the way across your career, not just in the role that you're in, but right across your career in that company and externally. And indeed, when I look at the career changes or the job changes or career changes that I've made, they've always been with based on a relationship and sometimes a mentoring-based relationship that I've had in the past. And moving from sales into partner sales management was exactly that. There was someone that I'd worked with in Cisco, had a really, really good relationship with. They were building out a new partner organization in the UK, and they needed someone to lead their biggest partners, their what we called our gold partners at the time. And so she took another chance on me, not having had much experience in partner management, but I was a sales leader, I was a sales manager at that time. So it was about applying those skill sets into a different role. And so it was a challenge. So for me at the time, it was a new challenge, and I was excited about applying the capabilities and the skills and experience I had into something else. So it was a challenge that really attracted me into the partner role. I think in hindsight, it's probably the best thing that ever happened to me in terms of aligning my skill sets and what I love into the role. In terms of I finally found that actually, Alanzo had met the right role for Alanzo, right, in terms of the capabilities and the things that I want to experience and the things that I wanted to do. It married to my capabilities really well.
That's awesome to hear.
Yeah.
I'd love to know what you feel the perception of kind of partner sales is like at the moment, because I know from my own experience in companies, I feel like I've seen two different sides to it. I've seen one side where it can feel in some businesses like a little bit of an add-on type of function. And then I've been in other organizations where it's absolutely critical, core part of the GTM go-to-market strategy. So what's your kind of feeling on what the perception is in the marketplace, thinking at it slightly more macro level, just in tech at the moment?
I mean, I think there is in the context of sales, there's a desire as a salesperson to control the opportunity, to control the deal, to control the destiny. That's a natural desire. So that natural desire stems from the need to be successful, and it stems from the pressure that you get from you in terms of needing to be on top of the deal. And I think in that regard, whether the go-to-market is embedded, the partner channel go-to-market is embedded or not, I think the partner community can sometimes be a challenge to a sales guy that needs to really make sure, he's got time issues, he's got quota issues, he's got sales management issues. Sometimes the channel doesn't always give the individual what they need in order to be on top of their success, on top of their deal, on top of their ability to control the variables. So I think that's broadly speaking what I see in the 3 or 4 organizations where I've done partner management. I see that constant challenge in terms of recognizing that partners in the industry, in the community, are good because they understand your customers, they do other things for your customers, but they don't necessarily but in order to actually be successful, you need to have some sort of control yourself, and maybe that conflicts with some of the partners. And then there's the other thing that a lot of partners, and their partners aren't necessarily just loyal to you, and therefore there's that thing that I think a lot of people are challenged with. There are a number of resellers and different IT vendors that will sell your technologies, and they'll sell your competitors' technologies as well, and that doesn't sit well sometimes with people.
Very true. And a lot of it, I think, goes back to the core principle you said at the beginning, really, which is building relationships, right? At the end of the day, being able to go out there and nurture the relationship you have with a partner or a person, it's going to put you in better stead. Things don't just happen, right? You've got to go out there and make them happen and put yourself in a position where maybe you're prioritized by a partner or vice versa. So
yeah, and I mean, that's good. That's true. And also, the old adage is true: people buy from people. It's still true today, and therefore, and the reality of from a channel perspective is that the channel has far more relationships with customers than any one vendor will ever have. That's just whether we like it or not. That's a reality. So when you look at the channel, they have more constant, consistent relationships with your customers than you can ever have. And they tend to be there for a longer period of time, right? They tend to be there right the way through the life cycle. So they are important. They influence your customer whether you like it or not. So that's one thing. The second thing is that, and this is an adage that I got, again, one of the lessons that I learned when I was in Cisco. One of my sales leaders at the time always said to me, he says, Alanzo, never, ever lose alone. And what he was compelling me to do is to not think that the destiny of this deal was in me. And what he was compelling me to say was that actually there are a wealth of people, both internally in my organization, also externally in the partner channel community, that if you built an army with all of these people, the likelihood of you winning would be way higher than you trying to do it on your own. And so I think that's what I try to do every day as a partner leader, is to actually leverage the relationships and leverage the influence that our partners have to help our salespeople recognize that you need to build an army. Don't do this on your own. The likelihood of you winning on your own is way lower than bringing in 2 or 3 or 4 more people to help you, who are with people that have got the right skill sets, but also the right relationships with your customer. So that's really the power of the channel. It is a bit, I recognize it's a bit counterintuitive for people that are paid on a direct sell. But the reality is that the more people that you have on your side promoting what you're trying to do, who have got different levels of influence and inputs into the customer, the more likely you are to win.
I think if anyone's been on the fence about whether they need to go 2 feet in on the channel or not, is definitely all in now. So that was a great kind of summary. Alanzo, I want to talk a bit about you as a leader, right? You've now been a leader for quite some time.
Yeah.
And I'd love to understand, in your view, first and foremost, what makes a great leader?
What makes a great leader? That's a huge question, Alex.
It is.
And I struggle to answer that question. I think there are so many things that people say about what leadership is and who leaders are, and I feel like it's, again, one of those things where there isn't one kind of like typical person or makeup of someone that makes up a leader. I don't think there is that. I'm not sure I've seen that. When I look at leaders that I really admire, I don't see any homogeneity there. I don't see any set of people that are all the same, have the same skill sets. I think there is probably one consistent thing about leadership which is really important, and that is keeping looking forward. So I think that the one thing that a leader has to do is actually has to help get his people or his team to achieve a forward-looking goal, and making sure that whatever the landscape is, that the focus and the gaze and the inspiration and the aspiration continues to be on that forward-looking goal. I don't believe that ever is a number. That's always something that is much more kind of like valuable to your business, your customer, your organization, the constituency that you're trying to serve. So I think that's probably the only thing that a leader needs to do effectively and well. He needs to take people to that journey. It's kind of like, I'm a very religious person, so it's kind of like Moses in the promised land, right? Getting people there and getting people to believe that that's the right place to be. How you then do that as a leader, I think it goes back to what we were saying before. You have to draw from yourself. You have to know yourself, and you have to draw from yourself in terms of who you are, what's important to you, what values you have. Yeah. And you have to leverage that in order to actually help you take your team or your business on that journey to the promised land.
Yes, yes, yeah. To that promised land. We're on our way. I think it's interesting that you say that you almost see different things from different people that have led you to think actually there's not a set theme per se which defines a great leader from another one, but it's really actually mainly just that forward looking view? What I'd love to get your perspective on is with the last guest, we were discussing, I guess, great managers, great leaders, a big ingredient in that is their ability to develop people, right? And being able to impart and share knowledge with someone and put them in a position where they can become better every single day. Is that something that you actually think is thematic in all great leaders, that they are just great at developing people? Or do you feel that's an overstatement in any way?
One of the leaders that I really got on really well with, and I really admired, and I really worked hard for, when I was at Cisco actually, didn't have that skill set. Did not have that skill set whatsoever, but yet she was a great leader for me. So I think so. I do think. I think it's important. Development and developing your team is important, and that is again is a function of leadership for sure, of managers, and it's a function of leadership in terms of actually making sure that that your team are developed. But actually, similar to sales, so there was a journey in sales where selling was about telling, or selling used to be about teaching your customer what your product could do and what it could achieve and what it could deliver, and then convincing them that they ought to buy it. And then what happened in sales was that actually with technology was that actually customers could figure out what your product was without you having to tell them. So they'd go online, they'd go and research your product, which meant that the role of a salesperson changed. It was no longer about teaching your customer about what your great product is. It was something else, because your customers already knew what the great product was. So you had to change what you sold, and we ended up in this kind of like solution sales type role, and with different sort of methodologies. And I think people are the same in organizations. I think the whole thing around development, I think, has moved from the manager being responsible for the development of the individual to the individual taking that responsibility themselves to develop themselves in different ways. So I think managers and leaders have got much more of a guidance role around development and learning for their individuals than they may have had in the past. So it's a critical part, but I think the individual takes on more of that role themselves, particularly as there are so many different avenues that individuals can take in a role, in an organization, in a career, right? So I think that development thing has slightly shifted over time, but I think the manager has a responsibility to actually make sure that their people continue to go through a process of development, right? Because I think the thing with not developing yourself is that you stagnate, right? So everybody wants to make sure that everybody's like moving forward in that respect. But I would say I think it's more important for the individual, and I think it's more important therefore for the manager and the leader to actually make sure that that process is happening with those individuals, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. No, it's fascinating, and I love getting slightly different perspectives on things, right? Because I'll digest after this. Last couple of things, Alanzo. I want to get your perspective on elite level salespeople, right? Of which you've seen many over your time. What ingredients do you make up elite level salespeople?
Yeah, I think that when I look at over the last like 15 or 16 years, 15 or 20 years, when I look at people in organizations that I worked at who were elite, I was just trying to figure out, what are the common things that they had that I could say, that's why these people were successful. And I think there's 2 or 3 things that really stand out for me. The first one is the obsession that they had with a customer, and by that I mean being able to really understand their customer, and at the same time understand the power of whatever technology or product that you have in your organization, and trying to bring those 2 things together to figure out what could really great things look like with a solid understanding with the customer, with what you have to really drive a journey and with that customer, to drive a different conversation. So the people that have been successful aren't just trying to renew the product, aren't just trying to add another couple of licenses or add another piece of the portfolio to an existing whatever. They're actually looking way beyond in terms of what the power of what they have can do to really transform something different. All the people that I see as successful have got that mindset. They're looking at doing something big to really offer big value. That's the first thing that I see. The second thing that I see with people that have been really, really successful, and it goes back to what I said before, is that they've built an army. They're not doing it themselves. They're not trying to, they don't believe that they're the only ones that can make this thing happen. So they built teams, virtual teams within and external to their organization. Obviously, I'm in the partner community, so you can see where I'm going with that, but they've built teams within the communities, inside and outside, to really drive success for that customer. They recognize that there's different skill sets and different capabilities that are needed along the way to be successful. And the third thing that I think I've seen that has been critical to the success is the articulation of the goal. So, and by that I mean, I think the people that I've seen be successful have been courageous enough to actually state their goal and articulate that goal and write it down and make it available for everybody to see. This is what I want to achieve. There is something, and again, it's a lesson that I learned from my current CEO, was that there's something about having a goal and writing it down. There's something about having a goal, which is great. And there's something about writing down a goal, which almost like it's almost like a commitment that you've almost given psychologically to yourself that I now have to do this. That really changes your attitude. So I think that's what I see in successful salespeople. They're audacious in terms of really dreaming big. They're building an army to help them be successful, and they're very, very clear to everyone about what they're trying to achieve, both with the customer and internally, in terms of what success is for them.
That's a very succinct and powerful three. So really appreciate you sharing that. I think the thing that's really interesting about the first point, as you know, I spent some time with Amazon, arguably the most successful company on the planet. And their number one, North Star for everything is customer obsession. And I think there's something to be said that, any decision that's made is really underpinned by that principle. And it's amazing how it feeds into what you just said there.
Yeah.
And on the third point that you made, and this is something I can kind of vouch for off camera, is, you've been someone who's really held me accountable to a lot of things that I've said or goals that I've set, and been able to provide some guardrails where otherwise I'd probably be a little bit all over the place. And so, again, it plays into, you talking to that as having that goal setting mindset as something that drives elite behavior. And I've been able to witness you do that, I guess, from a coaching and a mentorship standpoint as well. So absolutely powerful things, and things I've seen you validate as well. Alanzo, I have one more question for you.
Yep.
That question is, how do you what's your best piece of advice for someone that wants to go from wherever they are in their career today to elite? What's your biggest and best piece of advice that you'd have for that person?
Wow, I would say that I would say kind of like know yourself. It goes back to what I was saying before. I was saying that the person that's going from here to elite is the same person. It's the same person. So I would say that the thing that's going to make the biggest difference is that is really truly understanding yourself, what your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and important, what are the things that you really love, what are the things that you really enjoy and want to continue to do and excel at. So I would say you probably have a very clear view of what elite means, and these discussions and what you're doing is really helping people understand what elite means and what elite looks like. But fundamentally, it's the same person that's going to get to elite. You're the same person. understand who you are, understanding really what motivates you, and spend more time in understanding what motivates you. Because when you get to elite, it needs to be you. It needs to be you really drawing from the skill sets and the capabilities and the motivations that you have. There is, again, as I said before, there is no archetypal fixed type of individual that makes up a great salesperson or a great engineer or a great doctor. It's all about how you leverage the things that are you into those roles, and make sure that you amplify those things that you're great at. One of the things that really typifies my leadership style is that I'm very much about community, and I'm very much about community because of my upbringing. You know, I was born in the church. I was brought up in a large Caribbean family, and egos cannot exist in those environments, right? And
Sure.
so, and therefore, it was all about community. It's all about working together. It's all about working hard. It's all about looking out for each other. And so, my style of leadership and trying to be the best leader I can is really about leveraging that sense of community in my teams in terms of what I do to actually make them successful. Because that's what's true to me. That's what really empowers me. That's what really kind of like motivates me. That's when I wake up in the morning. When I wake up in the morning, that's what I want to do. When I go to bed and I've done that, I feel like I can rest easy. And that's with everybody. You've got to figure out what you are, what really, really motivates you, and apply that into that perspective of elite that you have. Don't look at someone else. Be the best that you can be, would be what I would say.
Alanzo, this is a moment where I wish people could feel atmosphere, because I'm absolutely feeling it right now. So look, thank you so much for coming on. This has been extremely powerful and insightful. So I hope it's helpful for the listeners too, and really, really appreciate you coming on. To anyone else that's watching, if you took even one gem away from this, please be sure to like it, comment, share, and subscribe. And we'll see you on the next one.